An historic piece of legislation has become law. The Grand Canyon State is now the 9th state in the union to agree to participate in an Article 5 Convention of the States. Joining me now from Phoenix, Arizona, Convention of the States Project State Director, Jeremy Wilson. Jeremy, before we begin with Arizona, we have some breaking news. You are number 9, that is Arizona, but we just have found out that North Dakota has become the 10th state to sign on now to an Article 5 Convention of the States. So we have 2 states, North Dakota and Arizona, just in the last couple of weeks signing on to a Convention of the States where we haven't really had one for almost a year. Louisiana, I believe, was the last one in 2016. So what was your recipe for success? How'd you do it?
Mostly it had to do with some really heavy sponsorship from some good legislators, people in like Mesa. Kelly Townsend, she sponsored very heavily the effort. There's a lot of grassroots effort, but a lot of it came down to sway with some of the representatives here in the state and getting them on board with the mission to limit the federal government.
And I want to back up a little bit because I want to point out how a single person can gum up the works. You had a gentleman, I believe he was a senator, by the name of Andy Biggs, who ran for Congress, and I think fortunately for the state of Arizona and the United States for that matter, he won. So he's a congressman now. He's in Washington, D.C., so he can no longer gum up the works, but that's exactly what he was doing in Arizona, correct?
That's right. Every year he wouldn't even bring it to the floor for a vote. So that was a big obstacle, and luckily this year we didn't have to face that.
And so what was the reasoning that he had? Did he think that this was going to be a runaway convention or somehow it was not constitutional? What did he say?
So I don't know the quotes from the man, but basically there was undertones of, it's a waste of time. For the most part, that was kind of the sentiment, that the overall Convention of the States would be a waste of time. The American people wouldn't support such a thing. And that was the general sentiment.
Interesting, because the framers of the Constitution apparently didn't think it was going to be a waste of time when they put it in the United States Constitution. So when you step back and you look at the effort that you did in Arizona, and as we try to achieve 34 states, which would trigger an Article 5 Convention of the States. Do you believe that what you all did in Arizona is similar to maybe, for example, what they did in Indiana recently, where they passed, or maybe in other states like North Dakota? Do you think this is a model for other states to follow?
There's been some really successful states. I have to say that what we did here in Arizona, as well as the other states, the job at hand is just getting started. Getting started with a convention in itself is quite the undertaking. Simply passing a resolution, that's the easy part. It required a lot of effort to do and whatnot, but to actually, if you think about it, this has never happened in the country, right, to limit the power of the government through a convention like this. So the work is really just beginning.
Okay, so you mentioned the opposition. What was their biggest opposition to an Article 5? Did they sense that this was going to possibly repeal the First Amendment or the Second Amendment? Is that what they argued?
Yeah, so when people generally hear about it at first, they immediately start thinking about both. On the right, they think about the Second Amendment, that the liberals are going to come in and immediately start going after the Second Amendment. For others, freedom of speech, things like that. Others, entitlements. And really, the bills that have been passed with the states, it's written into the resolutions that if the convention is not specifically in regards to limiting the federal government, like term limits, the spending and deficits, and generally like that, then the states will automatically withdraw from those conventions.
All right, so what now? Do you try and educate people who either don't know about Article 5 or are opposed to Article 5?
Well, really, the work at hand now is getting ready for a convention. So that includes getting the state itself, the governing body, ready for what a convention is and what it might be and how it would be conducted. And this includes doing draft amendments and then determining whether or not the public has garnered support for that. So working with the legislator and stuff like that to prepare, and then there's a lot of education. We have to educate the public. We have to educate businesses and institutions. And what does all this mean if we have a convention to limit the power of the government?
Right. And President Trump, in my estimation, is kind of in direct support of Article 5. He's come out in favor of term limits, and really there's only one way we can achieve term limits. Washington is not going to term limit itself, and it would be through an Article 5. And if you look at the behavior, in my opinion, of the Republican leadership and other members of the Republican Party the last week or so with the Obamacare debacle, I think it's a case study for term limits. But what if we had a mechanism, I ask rhetorically to you, what if we had a mechanism, we the people, to repeal and kill Obamacare, because that could also be one of the pieces of legislation, or one of the amendments that could be proffered. And that is a citizen's form or a state form of repealing legislation that we don't agree with.
I don't think using convention of states to repeal and things like that is at hand. I think it's a larger picture that convention of states attends to than specific legislation. Well,
that's the beauty of Article 5. If you came up with a constitutional amendment that allowed we, the people, to repeal something like Obamacare or something like Roe versus Wade, overrule a Supreme Court ruling, which is necessarily one of the amendments being proffered out there, what a wonderful thing. What a power to the people move that would be, and how it would showcase the genius of the framers of the Constitution. Jeremy, thanks.
Sign the petition at cosaction.com and get as many of your friends and family to do the same. With your full address, your state legislators will know that you really are their constituents in their district. Our success depends on you, so we're inviting you to be part of history. Let's invoke the constitutional solution that's as big as the problem.